Why do all brands become mid? It's a real question, you know? I don't know if you've noticed, but all the big brands had a time when they dropped bangers, where quality was top-notch and there was a real movement behind the project. It's during this period of doing things right that they achieve so much success. But there's always a point where things start to go south. We've seen it with Nike, where over the past 20 years, the quality has been on a steady decline. With Lacoste or Ralph Lauren, they've transformed into outlet brands that sell just random basic merch. Even Supreme, the ultimate streetwear icon, despite its scarcity strategy and limited quantities, kept growing in popularity and revenue year after year for 20 years straight. Well, currently, the brand is slowly plateauing, or even going backwards. For the first time in its history, the brand is making less than the year before, and not just a little. In 2022, they reported a record loss of revenue, totaling $38 million.
I declare bankruptcy!
This pattern of a brand losing popularity year by year, or just selling overpriced junk, is something that repeats itself a lot, and you've probably noticed it, but you might not know why. So, let me break it down for you.
Hey guy, welcome back to the first and... what the hell?
New video. A year ago, we made a French video about the impending decline of Supreme, and unsurprisingly, a year later, Supreme is indeed on a downward trend. Of course, we didn't say the brand would disappear overnight. You can check out the video if you speak the language.
I love a croissant. Omelette du fromage.
But what's happening with Supreme is pretty much what we've seen with most historic brands that we still know today. Whether it's Hugo Boss, Lacoste, Ralph Lauren, Bape, they all have more or less the same story. Speaking of history, to better understand how these brands end up where they do, you've guessed it. We need to provide some historical context. Brands aren't something new. On the contrary, they've always been crucial in human history. Even in ancient times, merchants used distinctive marks on their products to stand out from their competitors.
Look, it's RB551.
Back then, there were no catchy McDonald's jingles or fancy packaging, but branding was already a thing. Things got serious in the Middle Ages when, in 1266, the English justice system created laws to regulate brands. Over the years, companies quickly understood the importance of having a recognizable brand. Customers, too, quickly grasped the significance of trusting reputable brands. Contrary to what some might believe, brands serve a purpose. During the era of the USSR, brands and branding were forbidden because they were seen as capitalist. When you bought a cake, it was just labeled cake, no matter who produced it. As you can imagine, since you didn't know who made what was in the store, companies didn't strive to create the best products and be known for their quality. Everything was pretty much, well... Having a recognizable brand encourages companies to do things right, or at least not produce straight garbage. It's a significant indicator for us as consumers. Some people who have really grasped the importance of branding are the bigwigs at Procter & Gamble, who literally own all the brands in the world. Ariel, Gillette, Always, Tampax, Braun, Head & Shoulders, Febreze, Oral-B, and the list goes on. You probably know and prefer these brands because, as they claim on their website, P&G brands are known for the excellence of their products. Well, people tend to believe that. I don't want to spread fake news, but if you use Head & Shoulders and go bald before you hit 30, there might be a connection.
You got me.
This idea of trust in a brand is crucial. It's not limited to consumables like food, soap, or similar items. It's obviously the same for clothing. That's why big investment groups, which are solely in it for the money, love to buy brands with a good reputation to create what's called a brand rent. A brand rent is the additional value they get when they sell you a $50 t-shirt instead of a $10 one simply because it has a Supreme, Hugo Boss, or Lacoste logo. It's part of our psychology. We prefer to go with what we know, and they take advantage of that. There are plenty of multi-brand groups, like the well-known LVMH and Kering, which together own 90% of the luxury brands on the planet. There's VF Group, with a catalog including brands like Supreme, North Face, Vans, Timberland, Dickies, and more. There's Anta Group, which initially created the Anta brand, but then bought big names like Fila, Salomon, Architects, and Wilson. You also have Marquee Brand, which owns Dakine and many completely unknown brands, but they were supposed to have bought Anti-Social Social Club. Surprisingly, it's not on their website. Maybe they accidentally bought it. Who knows? At one point, even Nike tried the multi-brand strategy by acquiring Umbro, Converse, Hurley Starter, Bauer Hockey, Cole Haan, before selling them all and keeping only Converse. They probably realized it's quite a mess to manage multiple brands simultaneously. Anyways, all these acquisitions involve hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. You might wonder why they don't use their money to create their own brands instead of spending $2 billion to buy Supreme. Well, they're not creatives. They're financiers with lots of money, but not necessarily lots of ideas. If you've watched this video we made a few months ago, you're aware of the Lindy effect's impact. For them, it's primarily an investment, and they know that Lacoste has a much higher chance of surviving and selling even in 50 years. The iconic brand that everyone knows is immediately more profitable than a new brand that would take years to establish itself. Furthermore, it becomes an asset that increases in value year after year. However, for the brand that's been acquired, it almost always means a loss of quality, relevance, or simply hype, because the success of a brand is often driven by the passion of its founders, who weren't solely motivated by money. When you replace them with financiers who just want to maximize profits, things inevitably change. We've seen it with Gucci, which was initially renowned for its ultra-premium luxury leather, and now they sell t-shirts, hoodies, and plastic iPhone cases. We've seen it with Ralph Lauren, who initially wanted to create a whole world around his brand, but ended up creating fake outlets with intentionally cheaper products sold at discounted prices. And, of course, we've seen it with Nike, where we explained how year after year, the company's leadership continually reduced the quality of materials while raising prices. Anyway, when big finance enters the game, whether through acquisitions by investment groups or when a brand goes from small to big in the world of billion-dollar brands with huge investors, that's when your favorite brand starts to make some questionable moves.
No, 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 no.
The reason is that when you're at this level of business, every penny counts. On the contrary of your favorite indie brand selling 500 t-shirts that likes to make great packaging or to add a few free gifts like stickers or even some candy sometimes. I've got no clue why they're doing that, but yeah, why not? It might cost an extra buck or two for them, but it won't break the bank and the customer always appreciates it. On the other hand, when you're producing millions of sneakers every month, even saving like a freaking half penny on your packaging means millions in your pocket. So when you see the kind of money involved in these small optimizations, you get why it's so crucial for them to save pennies like this. But it's not just that. Now that the brand belongs to them, they want to squeeze it and get as much money as possible by expanding the product range to include rushed, low-quality products that are there solely to sell more. It could even be basic water bottles with logos. Another example is Lacoste or Ralph Lauren slapping their logos on Stan Smith's. In short, these are things that dilute the brand and make it somewhat disappointing, but they bring in a lot of dough. You've probably realized that these are choices purely driven by profitability, even if it harms the customer experience or the image of the brand they spent so much to acquire. For all these questionable but financially profitable decisions, these investment groups seek CEOs to take care of the brands they acquire. Clearly, they don't care if the person is passionate about fashion, they want someone who knows money. That's why, for example, with the brand Gap, you had a CEO who used to work at Disney before, then he gets replaced by a guy who was a CEO at Drug Mart. Really, clothing is the least of their concerns. They need someone who understands logistics, finance, tax optimization, in short, someone who masters money.
Money, money, money.
Once the CEO is in place, contrary to what you might believe, a CEO may be a top executive, but they're still the company's first employee, and employees can also get fired. So, like any good employee, their goal is to amass as much money for as long as possible without getting fired by the only people who can fire them, the majority shareholders, the ones with the capital, you know? And you've probably noticed that a good CEO must provide good dividends to those who hold the company's capital, which means increasing the company's margins. This can be achieved through strokes of genius, often made by the founders, like Steve Jobs with the iPhone, or the Netflix executive who thought switching from DVD rentals to streaming might be a good move. But most of the time, increasing the company's margins means reducing costs by firing people or cutting costs by outsourcing or lowering the quality. It's precisely the process we've seen with Bernard Tapie, who both saved and, to a certain extent, destroyed Adidas. And it's mainly this logic that drives Nike to sell you plastic Air Force Ones for $115, even though they've been scheming since the beginning of their history. We gotta make a video to explain how Nike got to this point, cause y'all seem to have straight up forgotten everything, I guess. So you quickly understand that when a CEO arrives, they want to increase profitability, so they might outsource for cheaper labor. Then another CEO arrives, they also want to reduce costs, so they cut corners on materials to make them cheaper. And you realize that in 20 years, the same product is nothing like what it used to be. Seriously, if you took a 2023 Air Force One and went back to 2001 with it, people would think it's a fake. And I'm not even exaggerating. The OGs know what I'm talking about.
The real ones know.
I don't want to sound like a communist or an anti-capitalist, but high finance is killing our favorite brands. That's just how it is. It's rare to see a brand survive at the very top without going through this kind of decline, if we can call it that. The CEO is often like a politician, primarily looking out for their career and willing to harm an entire entity for their own interests. They might make choices that bring out a lot of money in the short term, but could literally kill the company in the next decade. And for example, with Nike and its declining quality, it saved them a lot of money for a decade, but they're starting to pay for that as more more and more people turn to New Balance. So for Nike, it might not be that big a deal. They'll survive. But that wasn't the case for Payless, for example. And even though these are extreme situations, there's almost always a before and after when big finance gets its hands on a brand. So if you ever wondered why clothing brands tend to become a disappointment after a while, it's not just a matter of time. It's often about financial optimization. In general, if you see an article saying, a brand has been bought out by a big group, there's a very good chance that it'll become mid, or at least not as good as before.